Okay, so this is a little once over on a typical night vision equipment kit that you might want, as a survivalist. I know, I think it was Main Prepper was talking about this kind of stuff, and wanted to go over some of it because it's starting to. It's always been available on the U.S. open market. However, it's come down in price. It's not come down in price as far as a lot of people thought it would. PVS-14 is pretty much top of the food chain unless you're getting into some really exotic thermal imaging stuff. But a lot of people don't understand is that there's several different grades on PVS-14s, and that the people who run that business in the United States right now come from a lot of families that previously, traditionally, a lot of those families have been in the diamond and gem industry, so they understand the whole concept of grading, clarity, and brightness, and all that stuff with gemstones. So when you grade the internal components, the intensifier tubes on night vision equipment, a lot of those people understand that. Over in Europe, pretty much the same story. The internal performance is graded a lot like gemstones. Externally, it's electronic stuff, and that's where a lot of people think, okay, it's a U.S. made or Asian made or wherever these devices were made. They're actually made all over the world, and then usually assembled inside the U.S. or in some cases, knockoff might be assembled in a foreign country where the parts came from a lot of the same places, but the critical component is the intensifier tube inside. Those are pretty much either going to come from the United States or Europe. Also, when you're looking at trade restrictions, there's no laws or restrictions against anybody owning these in the United States. However, there are some restrictions that involve export from the United States. And that, in recent years, has gotten a little bit foggier because the intensifier tubes get built into a lot of camera equipment. So, when you're looking at having a kit for survival use, one of the reasons people were picking a 14 is because it's more versatile. And however, there's a lot of PVS-7s that are still in circulation. They've been out since the late 1980s. However, they didn't really get into widespread military use until right around 1990-91. We started seeing more of them. The Israeli government, the Israelis still use them. A lot of law enforcement agencies still use them. They were taken out of production for a short time in early to mid 2010, or I mean like 2004, 2005. The 14s the 7s were taken out of production for a little while. I was notified by a couple of companies lately that they've gone back into production, and the spare parts were always around. So as far as availability in the market, that's why back on SavvySurvivor.com, which I think hasn't been updated since 2005, the guy writing that said that they were out of production. PVS 7s were out of production at that period. Everything had been shifted over to PVS 14s like these, but now 7s are back in production. They're still not that popular with the survivalist crowd. Boaters really like the 7s though. The PVS-14s are water resistant, but not really submersible. If you get one in the rain, it's not the end of the world. You're dropping a puddle, it's not the end of the world. You go scuba diving with it, you got a problem. They can be damaged if they get running water on them. So if you go into a running stream with these in a pouch or in your gear, and it's not been waterproofed, and it's kind of exposed to running water, or pressurized water, or pressurized hose, or something like that, it's possible for that water pressure to overcome some of the seals in there. But the seals in there are usually pretty decent. It's just not rated to be submersible, but they're relatively rugged. The full kit's usually going to involve a head mount, which a lot of people don't use. A lot of people just use these handheld, so these things will stay in the package. If you lose one or screw it up, it's not the end of the world. They're all over eBay. A lot of surplus stores have them. New, they're really expensive, but because they're all over eBay and a surplus store, you can get, yeah, I mean, they're around. They're not all that durable, but they're reasonably durable. The shape is a little weird because the original design was for these to work under a helmet. And if you look at the old Black Hawk Down movie, you'll see the exact same head mounts because these were used with the PVS-7s. And they wore them under a helmet. By the time we got to the whole late 90s and then up until the invasion of Iraq, the way you're usually going to see these worn by military troops is that there's a mount on the helmet, and they just don't use this thing very much. That's another reason why the stuff that ends up on eBay and all that, usually the head units are in pretty good shape because those guys were using the helmet mounts. I don't have a helmet mount available for display right now, but there are people that use the helmet mounts, like with a skateboard helmet, a ProTech helmet, something that's actually not even ballistic, but they can be a lot more comfortable than these things. These things really can they can get uncomfortable, but there's a lot of adjustments on those. But you got to have some sort of a mount. There's no way to otherwise to hold this up to your face and use it, except for having it as a handheld. And a lot of guys will just have this as what they call a pocket scope, just the unit. There's a compass that's used for the military stuff. There's a little activation button. There's no way I found of replacing the batteries in these compasses. And because you have to test it at night with a night vision device, and there's a little prism in there, the compasses get a little tricky. And so it's not all that useful to have with a PVS-14 kit, although they're a little bit more useful with a PVS-7 kit because the PVS-7 is usable as binoculars. The thing is, these things are you can remove the lens cap, put this on, you can do that, but you have to take it on and off when you go and replace your lens cap. Another part of the kit for the air softers is critically important is a sacrificial lens. You remove the regular lens cap, you put the sacrificial lens on. For the airsoft stuff, that's absolutely mandatory because you got airsoft BBs flying around that can hit this and start damaging your unit. And that's part of the game works, okay? Airsofting with force-on-force training is a big boy's game, okay? It's people get hurt, stuff gets broken. You prevent high-dollar damage by having a sacrificial lens on your device. The other thing, airsofters usually aren't going to use a real PVS-14 again because they're shooting each other full automatic with his BBs that can damage the scope. However, if you've got people shooting at each other with live ammo, you know, dudes are just not going to care. I mean, he's either dead or not dead. But generally speaking, there's no sighting reticle in one of these. You have to either use an infrared laser, point shoot, or use a scope that is night vision compatible. So this is one of the older EOTechs, but it's in relatively new shape, never been used in the field. It's got an on and off button. The on and off situation is kind of like for just the brightness on it, and then you press both buttons at the same time to turn it off. There's a third button in there that might not come through the video that puts this thing into an infrared mode, which means the little crosshair reticle thing inside isn't going to be visible to the naked eye. What's going to happen is it'll be visible through the night vision gear. On the knockoff EOTechs, that little crosshair just goes from red to green when you press that third button. And that's okay if you're using first and second generation night vision equipment for airsoft use. What happens when you use a third generation airsoft night vision equipment for the airsoft use, you start running into an issue where it might burn the crosshair into these things, and it's supposed to go away, but it may not. If you use the infrared stuff on here, that's supposed to prevent that. And then of course we have a weapon mount, a Picatinny weapon mount. These things a little bit tricky to find even from the civilian suppliers. Again, you can get them at eBay, surplus stores, that kind of thing. They almost never come with the device. Now, the little thread-on thing on these, which I can show you here, is actually the same as what you'll see in the bottom of a camera. Okay, so you can use camera tripods and camera mounts with these things, and these things are, again, the same as a camera. The video camera that I'm using for this video, I could attach here, except that there's this little tab, right? And this little tab fits in this little groove just to make sure these things go on straight. But the little threaded thing, the little threaded thing is the same stuff. The other thing is, like I was saying, the head and helmet mounts for these things are the same as what were for PVS-7, which means that those are a centered mount. These things are going to use an adapter. Okay, these things have to have an adapter to put this on a head mount. This is the adapter. This one's obviously been around the block a lot because these little wires are a little bit exposed, okay, but it still works. The reason there's wires in this thing is because it will automatically turn off that PVS-14 when you take it off. Okay, so if you say, well, I put it up on the adapter, I took it off, and the switch was on, but the device turned off. That's because of the way that little adapter is made. The 6015, which is a commercial variant of the PVS-14, doesn't have that feature. Okay, so every once in a while you're going to see some of these on the market don't have a wire. That has a wire that's blacked out, but you'll see a few that don't have that feature. It's probably because it was from a 6015. This is a commercial PVS-14, which means it was never intended for military sale. It's marked like that, and the 6015 would be nearly identical, except it's not going to have this little knob right here, which adjusts the brightness. The other commercial sale versions you're going to see are ones that have been built by some guy from parts, and they're usually going to have a little bit different battery compartment, maybe, but the parts are compatible. This particular one came from a friend of mine who was he was a vehicle driver. He did work overseas, and his work was such that he had to be able to work in and around a vehicle without running a lot of lights. So this one has a little different rear lens assembly. It's a wide angle rear lens assembly. It's made to prevent fatigue. The light comes out this way, comes in this way, out this way. The thing about this for tactical use is that it will light up your face. Now, if you're in a vehicle and you're not trying to sneak through the jungle, it just doesn't matter. And that's one reason they wanted this set up. The other thing is it's a little more compact, but this rear cover, that's just like a some little industrial cap thing. There's no eye shade. Now, for wildlife observation and stuff like that, people dispute this one because animals could still see the little green light from a distance. It's not super bright, but they can kind of figure it out. This is kind of the military style eye shade. This covers it so that the light coming out of the back of the thing doesn't light up your face. But if you notice inside of there, that rear lens is smaller, and it doesn't quite have the wide angle field of view. So what happens when somebody's walking through the woods and using this a lot is they're constantly, if it gets a little bit out of whack in relation to your eyeball, you start losing your field of view. And when you hear these stories about some guy walking off a cliff or driving into a tree or something, he was using this style. These are the ones where you bump into stuff, you walk into a tree or something, you end up with some depth perception issues because you can only look at it when you're looking through it. You got to look through it straight on, and as these little head mounts and helmet mounts shift around on your head, it can go a little bit out of whack. But the thing is, it's tactically sound, and this is the one guys will use with a weapon mount because they have the eye shade. This one right here is the one that's vehicle operation or walking around a long distance or something like that. If it shifts around a little bit, you can still see the image through it when it's not totally dead nut straight.